Hello, guys, and welcome to a new episode of the Gloves On podcast. We're your host, Alexander Brems, and Marcus Sundin is here as always. And today we have Mikey Quinn with us. Mikey, welcome.
How are you doing, Alexander? How's things, Marcus? Thank you very much for having me on.
All good here. We're just very happy that you are with us today. We want to talk about, I've studied a little bit of soccer psychology or mental performance, how you can do that better. So why should keepers out there do that? How much can it help?
I mean, yeah, in terms of how much psychology can help, the best way I can kind of make it simplify for people is if you were having, if you imagine goalkeeping as physical, technical, tactical, and mental, right? They're kind of your four quadrants. So you've got physical is, how high you can jump, how quickly you can move, all these different exercise mobility. Your technical will be all the different techniques you use. Okay, you're going to use that when you're on the pitch pretty much all the time, be those two things combined. Tactical in match situations as well, your positioning, all these kind of things. Mental, though, is probably the only one, bar physical, out of the four, where on and off the pitch you're using it. It pretty much affects every interaction you're going to have in goalkeeping, whether that's talking to a coach or receiving feedback, whether it's your confidence and trusting your decision to come and catch a cross or to stay on your line. So it is, obviously, I'm going to be quite biased in this and say it's the most important, but it is definitely one of the most important aspects of goalkeeping for sure. I think it's knowing as well, it's understanding, why we do the things we do, why you might get nervous before a game, or why, you might make a certain lapse in concentration or, seemingly poor judgment, and being able to understand all that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because you can always, you can train yourself to become in good shape. You can train yourself to have good technique. But if you have those two things and you don't have the third thing, the mental part, then that is where you start making mistakes. That's where, from personal experience, I've always been good 88 minutes. And then there's 2 minutes of not focusing and not concentrating, and that's what I've been working on. That's what I found out when I was about 20, which is, you think that it's too late or not, but that's what I started working with, that I need those last 2 minutes for me to be good for 90 minutes and start developing way more. And brilliant. Yeah, that's when I started reading, studying, listening, and now even more with this podcast, and now talking to you. Hopefully we'll learn a lot today, both me, Marcus, and all the listeners. So I can vouch that it is the most important part.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Sorry to cut across you. Just, I think in terms of goalkeepers who start studying psychology or start coming into this world, it generally comes from a place of they're in a bad run of form, or maybe they've kind of had a bit of a negative experience in things. And that tends to be the reason they get drawn to it, and a lot of the time. Hopefully, and we'll talk about it later on, some of my recent work will draw people who are kind of in maybe a better headspace, or coming, to go from performing at 8 or 9 out of 10 every week to hopefully get to that 10 or 11 out of 10 each week. So that's just something small I want to add in there, just a little buzzword that went off my head when you spoke about your issue with the final 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to be in a negative curve or doing bad over a long time. What's the word? You don't have to be in a negative curve or in a bad space in order to contact a sports psychologist or a mental performance enhancement coach. It could just be that you are, as you said, you're currently training a 9 out of 10, but you want to be that 10 out of 10.
Exactly.
And get all that. That's what I convinced one of my friends to do, because he was doing very well. But I was like, you can get an extra edge. You need that. We chase that 1% in practice every time, and being mentally stronger is just something that can move you beyond those 1% and keep developing.
Exactly that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's oftentimes, people say, I think the guys, the Modern Day Goalkeeper, who've done a bit with lately, they've spoken about it quite honestly in their own kind of biographies, I suppose. And similarly, I was, the same when I was younger. Manager used to say stuff like, God, he's a talented lad, but if he can just get his head right, he'd be brilliant. And, kind of a throwaway comment, but there was something to it. If you could just kind of crack the performance code, I suppose, and learn how to channel your energies in the right way. You could really make a big difference. And I know in my own career, it kind of catapulted me into much bigger and better things once I started learning this area.
Awesome. And talking about the modern day goalkeeper, you recently just launched a free ebook with him, which I encourage a lot of goalkeepers out there to obviously read. I haven't read it yet myself. I'm saving it for my flight to America, so I'm gonna enjoy it on my flight to America. But I obviously think it's gonna be a great book to read. How did it get along with the modern day goalkeeper? Why did you decide to make this ebook with him about psychology?
Yeah, so the lads at the Modern Day Goalkeeper, they're brilliant lads, by the way, just to start out with that. They are some of the most genuine people I've ever come across. We're actually all I was born in the city where they all live, in Sunderland, northeast of England. So we had that connection straight away. But it was social media. It was around the time, I think, a relatively young goalkeeper just retired due to, the mental struggles of the game he'd had. Promising, very talented goalkeeper. I can't quite remember his name, but he all about out of the blue just retired, and I think it kind of took everyone back a bit. And the lads, being the lads that they are, the Modern Goalkeeper set up a group called Inside the Box. It's a Facebook group. I know, Alexander, I've seen you on there before. It's very much a kind of support network for younger goalkeepers. So just through that, and through exchanging messages on social media, I just started sharing a couple of posts, just little bits and pieces that I thought might help or might, maybe just change someone's perception of maybe, what they're being told or what they've heard. And we just, we stayed in touch, and we just said, let's put something out there. And there we have the ebook, I suppose. That's the story of that.
Cool. We also had Lee on for an episode earlier on this podcast, and it's our best podcast so far, according to listeners. We had so many, and the feedback we received was just amazing. So I'm just looking forward to read the book as well. What are some of the key takeaways? Obviously you were one of the guys making it, but if you should give us some of the key takeaways, obviously save some of the good stuff so we have some excitement for the ebook. But what for you were some of the key takeaways and the most important things coming out of this ebook?
Okay, without giving the whole thing away, I just think, look, first and foremost, we wrote that so that hopefully there was something in it for everyone. So whether you're a coach, a parent of a player, or a goalkeeper, you're a young goalkeeper, or even professionals, and there has been, thankfully, there's been one or two who've got in touch to say they enjoyed it from all different backgrounds. That was the main thing. We wanted something that everybody could get something out of it, basically. We didn't want to just target young keepers, just coaches, whatever. So that was the first thing. So different people will take different things from it. If I was to give something, let's say, quickly on each one of them. So for a coach, I suppose we had a little section on what goalkeepers want from a goalkeeping coach. It was a feedback question put out through the Modern Day Goalkeepers platform. And there was almost nothing said about, technical training or, like hand position, stance width, all the usual buzzwords we hear. It was all about the kind of, the personality of the goalkeeping coach, how he handles certain things, the person, basically, how he looks after you as a person. For parents then, we'll go to them next. That was another one, the good and bad sports parents. It was basically about, basically realising you have a role to play if you're the parent of a goalkeeper. It's not as simple as drop your child off, shout your head off for 90 minutes while he's playing or she is playing, and pick them up again. You have some roles and responsibilities, set good examples, and to kind of help them with their development. For younger players then, it was a lot about, maybe understanding why you're making mistakes, maybe kind of, putting things into the area of, if you're making mistakes repeatedly, here could be some options why, or here's how to cope. And then for the older goalkeepers, there's a lot of stuff in there about things like regrets, handling pressure, these kind of ideas. So I think, I haven't really given you any takeaways there, but I think that's kind of one of the big things. You'll find in the book as well, it's largely practical based. So I didn't want to, and the lads were 100% that, we didn't want to put a book out there that was just full of theory and, would just be, send people down rabbit holes. We just said we'd give practical tips to handle each situation. And I'd like to think we did that in some way.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to read it. I think it's great that you, in some way, don't just look at the goalkeeper in general, but you broke it down to also think about, obviously, for young players, the parents and the coaches, because as we know, as goalkeepers, it's not only us. Many people obviously say we are at a lonely position, stuff like that, but obviously there is a lot of people around us. So I think it's awesome that you have also broke it down to have more areas than just the goalkeeper in general. I think that's awesome. I'm just looking forward to read it, to be honest.
Let us know, mate, whenever you get a chance.
Yeah.
Obviously, whenever you're back over to stateside, let us know what you think.
Awesome.
Yeah. I read it. I think I read it the day after it came out, and I read it in one sitting because it was just. I love reading about like soccer psychology, and this was finally I've read Dan Abraham's Soccer Top 1 and 2, and there's a little bit about goalkeeper specific, and he's had some great examples. But this was just, as you said, it was a basic guide for everything. It could be for coach, parent, player, young player, etc., etc. So it was just really interesting and a great read, and I hope that one day you guys will make like a big book, like 200 pages of this, because that could be. I think the audience is there for it, and I would buy it without a doubt. And I just love that ebook. And it was like I don't read a lot, even though I just had my bachelor's and so on. But
you just graduated college and you don't read a lot.
No, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
I don't read a lot outside of school, if you could say that. And then except for things that really interest me, which was like soccer psychology and what I just read about goalkeeper psychology in that ebook, and it was brilliant. So from leading on from that, we've asked our Instagram followers that they could ask you questions. So some questions from fans or keepers or whatever you can say. There was just that Carsten that we had on for an episode, he asked how to prepare mentally for an important game and how to deal with pressure. I remember Lee talking about pressure at one point. So yeah, can you give us a guide, if you can say that?
Yeah, no problem at all. This is actually quite close to my own heart. So I think in the book, you'll see I gave a little blurb about an important game and, mistake I made. But just dealing with important games. So there is this kind of concept, this theory that you train like every game's a World Cup final or like, a massive game. And by the time, it comes to game day, you've done it 4 times that week or whatever, it's easy. In theory, that's great. But again, it can be quite difficult to actually do that in practice. There's a few different areas on that. I mean, first of all, if you're talking about pressure, I'll go with pressure first because that's something that you'll deal with before the game, and nerves and all those kind of things to tie in. Generally, the first thing you look at is, well, why am I nervous? Why is there pressure there? So, if you're feeling nervous for a big game, maybe you're feeling anxious, you might feel sick. I know when I was younger, I used to be horrendous for this. You have to give that a meaning. You have to understand what's causing that. So the why is very important, and that gives you the opportunity to reframe it. So if you're sitting there going, oh my God, I'm going to be playing in front of however many 100 or 1,000 people, I could make a mistake. Oh God, I haven't trained well this week. God, this is so important to me. The rest of my career depends. All these kind of things. It can be tough, but just with a flick of a switch, and this was actually a technique taught to me by an incredible man called Dennis Evie, somebody who I did a lot of work with. He's a positive performance coach. If you can reframe that and make it into a challenge, it becomes that bit better, I suppose. It flicks a switch in your brain. So I would go, for my own personal example, I would something like, right, well, why am I nervous? Because it's important to me. I love playing football. I love playing goal. It's really important to me. Well, if it's something that's important to me, I'm actually quite excited by it. I'm getting to go out and do something I love in the next, half an hour. I got to go play 90 minutes with my friends and, see what happens. Off the back of that, then I can say, all right, well, I know I'm a little bit nervous and I know I'm about to do something I love. So I'm going to challenge myself to be the best I can be today. Then all of a sudden it becomes a challenge. And that's, instead of being threatened by something, you're now confronting it head on and taking it on. You go from having that kind of butterfly, sick feeling in your stomach to almost getting not an adrenaline rush, but your posture changes. Everything kind of seems to come up with it. that would be one of the big ways in dealing with kind of pressure, nerves, that kind of thing for a big game. The other thing as well on match day, you can do certain things, certain triggers that get you into a better state. So rituals, as I like to call them, in terms of maybe you only wear a certain training top or a certain kit the day of the game. Maybe you eat a certain meal before every match. It's these kind of consistent little markers that you set yourself before every game that lead to more consistent performances mentally in my eyes. And then one final thing, because obviously, look, this is all great, you know, but if somebody has a massive game tomorrow and they're going, God, you know, I've no markers, I've no rituals, you know, I haven't got any of this stuff together. I would say if you're in it that's, you know, unfamiliar, or if you're, you know, nervous, you're kind of, everybody's been in the game where they're not quite with it just yet. They're not quite in the game. Maybe the speed of it's too much. Maybe, you know, you're just not comfortable in your goal for some reason. There's a concept called grounding, which is essentially where you take a couple of deep breaths and you feel your feet on the floor. That's a very rudimental explanation of it, but that's essentially what you try and do. It's to get you into the present moment and say, right, what do I have to face right now? What challenges do I have? And essentially, that would be, without giving everything away again, as I said, that would probably be one of my top tips or top few tips for kind of dealing with nerves, playing important games, those kind of ideas.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, especially the last part about the deep breaths, because I read that I stood in before the game, like we were standing and they're saying our names and so on. I stood in like a power pose, something that I started doing this season, like standing in a power pose, arms at my side, kind of like a Superman pose, and then deep breaths and just clearing my head, and it just apparently it gives you confidence and gives you like nervenstarke is the word, I think, so where you have like strong nerves that you are ready for the challenge coming. So that's something that I did and I think helped.
Brilliant. Well, just a small thing on, so power poses are, you know, it's a biological thing, really, physiological even. If you hold a power pose, I can't remember the exact study, I think it might have been Oxford or Harvard research from one of those universities. Correct me if I'm wrong on that now. But I think it was testosterone levels increased by 25% or 30% or something crazy like that in 2 minutes they held it. So, I mean, it just shows, you know, there is kind of some measurable science behind it. And breathing as well. It's, you know, you're controlling pretty much everything with your breath. So that's it's a great coping mechanism to have, right?
Yeah, and talking about coping mechanisms, we had a question from, sorry, I can't remember his name, but he said like, when you make mistakes or when someone makes a mistake, what good coping mechanisms can you do to forget about it?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a common enough one. Unfortunately, you know, especially younger keepers, you have to kind of learn through mistakes a lot of the time. It's like, I know I didn't have a goalkeeping coach until I was 17. So, you know, it can be tough for, you know, and that's a common thing. I don't know how it is with you guys, but in Ireland especially, that would be quite a common thing. So in terms of mistakes, look, you have to understand where is it coming from? You know, what's the mistake? What is the mistake actually being made? So are you making poor decisions? Let's say coming for a ball over the top that maybe wasn't yours. Is your angle a bit off? Did you try and catch something and it leaked through? Understanding it and understanding what caused it. So you've understood the mistake, now you have to look at maybe what caused it. So is it training errors? Is it whatever? That's just something, you know, from off the pitch. In terms of on the pitch then, dealing with the actual mistake. So a couple of quick takeaways that can work. So the first one I always do, and I've gotten a little bit of trouble for saying it in the past, but it's something I do a lot, is I smile.
Yeah.
I actually laugh or smile, to be honest. It's something I spoke about in the book. I played a massive game over here in a PFAI, so it was a players' trade union in Ireland. We played a game against the local side, but it was a chance for pretty much every manager and scout in the country to come and watch, including Northern Ireland, which is a separate league. You know, so there's a big crowd at this game. And I would say no more than 5 minutes in, I conceded directly from the corner. And, you know, my head blew off. I just couldn't cope. I think 10 minutes later, back pass went under my foot. Just one of those days where nothing goes right. You know, you walk away from the game on this is horrendous. And obviously, I wasn't picked up by a club after. Flash forward a few months later, I managed to have a trial at a League One club in the UK, and I made a mistake literally the very first save I had to make. An easy shot went through my hands and went in. I know I'm probably not selling myself as the best goalkeeper of all time here, admitting that, but and because of what I'd learned from the previous experience, I was able to smile and laugh and, you know, power pose, breathe, all these kind of things. Yeah. And I ended up being offered a contract at that club. So the difference is, you know, how you bounce back from a mistake is more important than the mistake itself. In terms of the actual feedback, you know, laughing, smiling, power posing, breathing, and then also, you know, do a little quick synopsis in your head. Maybe, you know, it doesn't have to be a full post-mortem, but if you've conceded a soft goal, is there any quick learnings you can take from that to learn on the job? Could you say, I showed a little bit too much when you're post there. Maybe the next time they come in from that wing, I'll just be a little bit tighter to it and be a little bit safer. Just small things like that can really help.
Also, I think that's very interesting when you said smiling after a mistake, because you also said people might think it's controversial because in some way people will maybe look at you a little bit arrogant if you make a mistake and then afterwards you smile. But now talking about it is all about confidence, because we can all make a mistake. But if we think about it for the rest of the game, we won't perform or be better by the mistake. So if you forget about it, and then, as you also said, analyze it after the game, because we can nothing do about it in the game. So if you just, I think it's a great takeaway as well to put on a smile, even though people might think it's a little bit arrogant. But I think it's a great takeaway to do that, because then you obviously gain the confidence again, and then obviously get back into the game.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I agree, and I actually did it once in practice where I made a mistake where I slid and I was so slow, and the ball went in, and I started laughing because it was so bad. And then my coach was like, "That's not funny, Alex. That's not funny." And I was like, "Yeah." So that was not funny afterwards. And coach was not happy, but of course carried on and had a great practice after that. But also shout out, I found out it was Gabriel Ortelli who asked the question. He plays at Watford U15, so cool. Hopefully he can learn from this. And message us if you have more, Gabriel.
We have one last question there that we decided to take out, maybe two. I think only one though. We had a listener already also asking how to deal with a bad run of games, because I can take it to our last season actually, where we started out very well. So I can even relate to this as well. And then at some point in the season, after winning 6 or 7 games, we got into a bad run where we lost 5 games in a row. And we decided as a team to do some changes and stuff like that. But for a goalkeeper, dealing with this, a lot of time gets the blame. We know that. So what would you suggest for a goalkeeper who maybe plays on a team that have a few losses in the back end?
Yeah, you know, it's always tough. I think by nature, you know, goalkeepers the first managers tend to look at and say, you know, why are we conceding goals? It must be the keeper, that kind of thing. Look, about in the games, it could be a few things. First of all, I'd always like to see, you know, is it a physical issue or is it a mental issue? So most of the time it will be a mental thing. But if it's physical, are you playing, you know, I know some, especially over in the States, you guys play, sometimes you can be playing 3 games a week and it's just your body, you know, you just can't get as much out of your body as you want to. That's the first thing I'd always look at. Is it a physical issue? You know, are you struggling with mobility? Are you, you know, is your kicking, have you hurt your hip and your kicking isn't where it needs to be? So from that, then the mental side of things, I would always look at what type of performance zone am I in? So you have an ideal performance zone. Everyone has it. It's where, you know, the difficulty of the challenge is balanced out by how much support you have to deal with that challenge. If there's too much challenge and not enough support, it just becomes an anxious state. It's a horrible place to be. If, you know, there's not enough challenge and you've too much support, you become very lackadaisical. You know, it's easy. It's boring, really. So if you're in that sweet spot where challenge and support are met, that's essentially where you're going to grow. You're going to perform. You're always going to improve, and even poor performances won't last. So that's great in theory. So how do you put that in practice? What I would say is look back to a time when you were performing really well, at your best, and then try and think, right, well, how did that look? What was I doing differently? Was there any habits that I was in then that I've stopped doing now? Maybe it was just drills you're doing in training even that you liked, your warm-ups changed. But just think, what at a time when I was at my best, what did that look like? And what does that look like now? And there might just be some small nuggets in there that can make a big difference.
Awesome. Great advice. It's great for the listeners out there to ask questions and then get an answer for them, because that's what we want to bring with this podcast, is to help the GK union out there. And as we agreed on earlier, the mental part is obviously, if not the biggest, one of the biggest. If you ask me, it's the biggest. But yeah, we also want to take it a little bit away from the serious side now. We always ask our guests on the podcast, because the podcast is called Gloves On, about the favorite gloves and why. So can you tell us a little bit about your favorite gloves during your goalkeeper career?
So yeah, I've been fortunate between kind of playing and going Gaelic football and in football. You know, I've been looked after with a few different crowds. So currently I'm wearing Tuto Secutor, I think his name. I've probably butchered that, but they're just very fitted. They're very thin. And they're consistent, which is the big thing. You know, I personally, and this is only personal preference, I feel like a thinner glove can give you a more consistent performance every time, because the ball feels the same every time. Even if the grip doesn't quite gel with the ball, your hand has to be involved in catching it. So that's what I'm using. And just leading on from that, the modern day goalkeeping's handling gloves, I think, you know, they've been on social media lately. They're another one that I like. You know, they're tough to use, but as a training glove, as far as that goes, you know, something that'll improve your concentration, coordination, technique, and put you under a little bit of pressure in training. That's something I like. But yeah, I've always been a fan of thin gloves. So the two have been brilliant for me so far.
Yeah, really interesting talking about those handling gloves, because that's also, when I was younger and sometimes still, like I've taken my gloves off to like just catch with my bare hands, because then it becomes obviously harder. You don't have grip and you don't have cushion. So that's just something that we've done in Denmark, and something that I recommend people doing, because then you have no support and you really just have to focus on catching. And that's what we want to do. We want to catch every ball if we can, but obviously it's about the saves. But yeah, Tudo, I've actually had a pair and I fancy them too. All right, Mike. So carrying on, because now we just talked about sport psych for like 30 minutes. How can people start studying, learning about sports psych so they can become better mentally?
Yeah, so if you're carrying on from this, I mean, obviously, if you haven't read the ebook, like Marcus, maybe get on that. But yeah, that's probably a great first place to start. I think it's a basic guide. It's just introducing some ideas to people. Aside from that, then I would say, you know, that support group, the Modern Day Goalkeeper, is a brilliant one for people who want to, you know, keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on. That's another great option to have. There's plenty of stuff like that on social media, which is the positive side of it, obviously. I know you guys are, you know, you've got some stuff on there as well. It's brilliant. Like, it is, that's kind of the main thing, is find the resources. Aside from that, then, in terms of actually studying, you know, we're going to have soon enough, I'll be producing a little more content on this kind of thing. And I'll be, you know, you can bear with me for a few weeks. There will be more stuff coming out and hopefully offering advice. So your actual studying then, in terms of looking at videos, maybe reading, reading kind of studies, all these kind of ideas, reading research papers, your best bet is really to start simple. Start on small terms like confidence, competence. They're two of the biggest ones, I think. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Things like that will just give you a little idea. Obviously, again, you know, if you can afford to work with a sports psych or performance coach like myself, you know, that's probably the best bet, to be honest, because at least you're getting a tailored personal experience. But I would say your best bet generally is obviously keep an eye out on social media, on the channels like yourselves, like the Modern Day Goalkeeper. And also, you know, try and get into these support groups, try and interact with people, you know, commenting on these kind of posts, asking favors. I think, you know, generally speaking, people like to engage with people who comment on their posts, that kind of idea. And then, obviously, like I said, you can do the traditional way, looking at research papers, watching videos on YouTube can help as well. Really can actually simplify things if you watch it on YouTube. And then the best option of all, I think, is to work with somebody one-to-one. If you can, you know, if you're in circumstances where you can do that, that's probably the best option of all three.
Yeah, that's great. Some great advice. And actually just talking about it or commenting about it, as you said, like there's like inside the box, the One Day Goalkeeper group, there's just people asking questions, and there's so many answering like yourself. And there's people out there who are willing to help for free if you have questions. But obviously having a tailored experience with someone like you or Hannah that we had on earlier, or someone else, it would just be obviously the best for that. And another thing, a great tip is to listen to this podcast, maybe more than once, because
Absolutely.
then you'll definitely learn something. Or listen to our other podcast where we had Lee or Hannah Bromley, another sports psychologist, or Richard Lee in talking about like football, like goalkeeping, and talking about experience and so on. And with that in mind, Mikey, thank you so much for being in this episode. We really enjoyed it, and it's a great episode, and we can't wait to give it out and share it to the listeners and your followers and so on. So make sure to go follow Mikey Quinn. And yeah, Mike, thank you so much.
Brilliant, man. Thank you so much for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Cheers.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Make sure to follow this podcast, Gloves On Podcast. Make sure to follow Marcus, which is Goalkeeper Dane, and myself, Danish Goalkeeper. And thank you. See you next week.